Hi, George here, and today we're going to be talking about using layers inside of Photoshop Elements. The project right here just has 3 layers on it. As you can see, there is the top layer right there, here's a second layer, and there's the bottom layer. Now, if you want to work along with this project using these same images, you can. You can use your own images, it doesn't matter. Down here at the bottom, here's the working file, and then here are those 3 images that I have inside this project file. Now I got all of these from Pixabay. Let me show you that real quickly here. And here's Pixabay. It's my favorite site for getting this kind of image to work with. And here's one of those 3 images. Now I'll put links for all 3 images in the description, so you can just click on those links and go right to the pages. But when you're here on the page, you want to go over to Download. And the one you want is one that says 1920 by 1280. That's the size that I'm using in this demonstration. So go ahead, get all 3 images, download those onto your computer, and then open those up as separate files over inside of Photoshop Elements. Okay, switch back over there again. So let's close this one down. There we go. So we then have 3 images open. There's one here. Now I had this coming in as floating images, as you can see there. That just makes it a bit easier. Here's our 3rd image. Now to get these floating windows, real simple. Go up here to Edit, come down to Preferences and General. And it's that checkbox right there, Allow Floating Documents in Expert Mode. The reason why I mention this all the time is because that doesn't come checked by default. So you probably are not seeing these unless you've already activated this checkbox. So make sure you come to Preferences, check that checkbox, choose OK, and that gets activated immediately. You don't have to close down, reopen, anything like that. That allows you just to be able to dock your image like this, where it's docked on a tab, or pull it down and float it. And that becomes very useful here when you're working with layers and bringing in new images into your layers. Now, I'll be covering a lot of stuff here on this YouTube channel, but if you want to learn everything about Photoshop Elements, take a look at my complete training course for Photoshop Elements, and I put a link for that right down there in the description. And in the training, I go through everything in here, all the layers, all the panels, all the menus, everything, including everything about how to use the organizer as well, not just the editor, which is what I stick with here on YouTube. So make sure you go over and take a look at that. It really is the best way to learn how to use this program. And all of my training videos on YouTube are designed assuming that you have that training over there and you've already gone through that training course. Okay, let's get back to this. I'm going to be starting with this picture as our base picture. I'll just dock this one like that. There we go. And we now can drag and drop these images into this picture back here. Just click an image, go over here right-hand side where it says background, and drag it over here and drop it on like that. I can then minimize that one. Same thing for this image. Just grab it, drag it over here. That's one way to bring images into another file. And as you see over here, they come in as separate layers. And that's what we want. Now at the bottom, I still have 2 of those showing. Here's the one file that I have 3 layers on, and then these 2 other layers. Just a little quick tip here. You can easily show and hide the photo bin down here just by clicking on the F5 key, and that shows or hides the bottom panel. Same thing for the tool options. F5 key shows and hides that panel. Occasionally useful to know about that little shortcut to clear things up and give you more space to work in. Okay, now in here, we have our separate layers. You can show or hide your layers. That's what this little eye right there is. You can show or hide our layers. There we go. When you're on a layer, that layer is separate from everything else in your project. So you can actually move this around if you want to. I can resize the contents of a layer. That's that little handle right here. There's one in the middle. Now these are going to change the ratio. The middle ones change the ratio of your image. You can see it like that. Cancel that one. Or the ones in the corner change the whole size. So you can either resize or change the dimensions, their proportions, by using these control handles. Also, if you come just outside of a control handle, you can see it right there. If I come just outside, give this little kind of bent arrow, click and drag, and that allows you to rotate the contents of a layer. I'll just put it right here, hit that green check mark, and that sets that into position. Now notice when I did that, the control handles have now moved out to the rectangle that's containing this image. They don't stay with the image like that. They stay on a rectangle that contains whatever that image is. That occasionally can cause some confusion if you're up here under image and you're doing some transformations. Some of these things, you'd expect that it would be down here in these corners, but instead it's up here on the corners of the bounding box that contains that particular image. Going back over here to layers, a couple things. Notice we have a background layer. This is the original picture. It says background, it's kind of italicized. It's also locked for transparency, which means that you can't paint on the transparent areas of this layer. Now, whenever I'm working on a project, I always recommend the first thing you should do is go to your background layer, click on the layer to select it. You see how I can click on different layers to select our different layers? Click on the background layer to select it, right click where the name is and choose duplicate layer right there. That's the one you want. Choose that, choose OK. It just makes a copy of that background layer. Now the reason why I do that is that first off, notice it's no longer locked over here. I now can use all of my tools on this layer. And second, it gives me a backup of this layer just in case I'm going to be changing anything. So I can hide that. I then have a backup of my original image. Now you may occasionally want to make backups of your other layers. It's up to you, depends upon what you're doing. Let's say I wanted to make a backup of this one. Same thing, just select it, right click, choose duplicate layer, choose OK, hide the original, and we now can put this down here at this one. You can actually reorder the position of layers by taking it and dragging it like that to a new position. So you can change where the layers are, and that changes the order sequence of your layers. So now I have my two backup ones here hidden, and they're down here at the bottom of my sequence. Now the reason why you may want to change the order on these things, let's say I came down to this layer here, that's that one in behind, there's the control handles. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller like that. And let's say I wanted to have this one in front right here. To get that image in front of this image, all you have to do is go over here to the layers, take that layer and drag it above the other layer. It's now in front. So you can use layers to stack the items inside of your work project. Anything above is in front of anything down below. So it's kind of like a stack or a deck of cards. Anything on the top of the deck you can see. Anything underneath can be hidden by what's on top. Now, if you have a transparent area, that's what this checkerboard pattern is right in here. You can see anything through that transparent area. For instance, I can see part of this picture here. That's that one right here. I can see it through this area back here. Where I have two transparent areas overlapping, I can see what's behind those, and that's our background layer right back in there. So this checkerboard pattern shows you what is transparent. That just kind of symbolizes transparent. Now, as we're looking over here on the right-hand side, the layers here are a little bit small, but not too bad. Depending upon your screen size, though, you may have a larger monitor. You may want to have these images larger. You actually have some options for this, for how these things are displayed on the right-hand side. It's up here, upper right-hand corner, just to the right of that trash can. It's a little thing here, kind of little 4 lines together. Click on that, and that brings up a little pop-up menu right here. Some standard stuff like our duplicating layer that we've already used. We'll talk about groups in just a little bit. You can rename the layer if you want to this way, but there is an easier way to do that. But coming down here to the very bottom, panel options, click on that, and this brings up the panel options dialog box. Now you have different options in here for the thumbnail size. This is your thumbnail size over here, right-hand side. For me, the size works out pretty well. It's big enough so I can see what it is, but the layers are small enough so I can get a lot of layers in here and work on a lot of layers at one time in a project without having to move things around. If you need a whole ton of layers, you can make this even smaller. Go to the smaller size here, hit the OK button, and this gets even smaller. You bring that back up again. Notice how you have to close it down and then bring it back up if you make a change. You can have no thumbnail if you want to. I've never had a reason to do that, but you can do that. That is a possibility. Or you can go for a real large thumbnail here, like that. So again, if you have a larger size monitor, you may want to go to the largest size thumbnails, just to make it as big as possible in here to see this. Now you can't change the size of the text so that you're kind of locked on that, but you can get these thumbnails larger in here. Let's go back over to that options again. There we go. Now there's one more thing down here. That's where it says thumbnail contents, layer bounds or entire document. I always have mine set at the entire document because then you can see where things are sitting on a page. For instance, I can see that I have this image up here and this much empty space around that. So it lets me know the size and the relationship to everything else in this. Same thing here for this layer. If you go to layer bounds instead, what it's going to do is to zoom in so that the image fills the layer. I choose OK. You see right there, it now fills that area, and it's not as useful for me because I'm losing that positioning information. But again, this might be useful for you depending upon what your project is. But I'll set that back to the way that I like working with it, and that's entire document. Also down here at the bottom, use default masks on fill layers. And what this means is if you add in a fill layer, we'll be talking about fill layers in just a little bit, it will also automatically give you a layer mask at the same time. The layer mask is going to be white, which is show all. So in most cases, you can ignore that unless you need it. but this will automatically give you that layer mask just in case you need it in the future. So I always have that one checked. Choose OK, and there we go. Those are now back to that setting. And we're talking about renaming. Easy way to rename a layer, just double click on the name like this, and you can then rename your layer. Just type in something else in here. I'll just leave that at just background. Click outside, it's now been renamed. So you can easily rename your layers. Just rename this one, double click. And I'll call this layer White Dog. And let's go up in here, double click for this one. And French Bulldog. So very easy to rename your layers. Now, if you right click on layers, you're going to be getting pop-up menus with different stuff depending upon where it is that you're clicking on the layers. If you click on the image, right click, you can rename your layer here. We can duplicate and delete, group from layers, create clipping mask, merge, flatten, and down here we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and gray. Now what this is, it's a way to visually organize your layers. I almost never use this. I normally don't work on projects that are this complex. If you have a project with a lot of layers in there, maybe you're doing 2 or 3 different versions of something, so you have one set for one version, one set for another version, you can color tag your layer in here. Just click on orange, and it color tags the layer right there. It's left-hand side. As you can see, if I go over here, it's just the left-hand side where the eye is. But you can come in and color tag your layers if it helps out. Now, it doesn't do anything at all in your project, doesn't do anything to your layers. It's just a visual clue. That's all it is. But sometimes you may want to have colorization in here just to kind of help organize things. Again, just right click, and I'll go to no color right there. So I'll go up here to the White Dog. I'll add a layer mask. That's the button right here. Click on Add Layer Mask, and it gives you a layer mask. Now, by default, the layer mask is white, which means it shows everything on that layer. If I make the layer mask black, it's going to hide everything on that layer. If I do kind of a combination of things, make part of it black, part of it white, it will only show the parts that are white and hide the parts that are black. Let me do a fast demonstration on that one. I'm just going to hide that layer up here using that hide button. We're down here. Now notice there is a light blue outline around the layer mask. That means that the layer mask side of this is selected. If I go over here, double click on this side, the light blue outline has switched over here to this side. This is the image side of the layer, and over here, this is the layer mask side of the layer. Between the two, it's a little link right here. It's kind of gold colored, a little link that links these two together. So if I move one, this also moves. I'll show you that in just a second, but first, let's make this layer mask work for us. I'll go over here, I'll grab the paintbrush. We're on the layer mask side. I have a real small brush size. Let's make our brush size a lot bigger here. That's pretty good, 205 pixels. We'll use that one. And then I'll paint with black right on the layer mask. Let me set my opacity clip to 100. There we go. I'll paint on the layer mask, and anywhere where I'm painting black on the layer mask, notice how it's hiding that content. And as I like to always say, black hides, white shows. There we go. We're now seeing it over here. Sometimes it takes a moment for it to catch up on the layer mask if you're painting, but you should see what you're painting over here on the right-hand side on the layer mask. Just like that. There we go. Notice I'm painting down here and it's not updating. It will. Also, sometimes for whatever reason, the thumbnails on the layer may not catch up. They may not be up to date. Or sometimes you may have the image side just disappear and you're just seeing just a blank area up here. If that ever happens, it's easy to fix. Just save your file. Go up to File and Save. Choose Save. There we are. Close the file down. Here's a little close button. Close it down. Open it back up again. File, Open Recent. And there's that file. I'll just dock that again. And now that layer is showing again. So if you're having problems with your thumbnails over here, for whatever reason, just save the file, close it down, and open it up again, and you should be just fine. Okay, now that we have something on here, if I take this image and I move it around, notice how the layer mask is moving with the content of the layer. That's why that little link thing is right here. They're linked together. If I move one, the other one moves. Now, if they're not linked, if I unlink that, just click on that to unlink it. Now, if I move the image, the layer mask stays put, but the image moves. Here's another reason why you want to be using layer masks instead of an eraser tool. And that's because the information is still all here. You can see it right there, kind of around the edges. The whole picture is still here. I haven't lost any of my picture. I haven't erased anything. It's still there in case I need to go back and fix or change anything. You can also see that by right-clicking on the layer mask. Here's where that right-click changes. Right-click on the layer mask, and you get a different little menu in here just for the layer mask. Choose Disable Layer Mask, and that's now no longer being shown, and I can see the whole picture again. I could redo my layer mask if I wanted to, or I could do something else in here, but I haven't lost any information on that. So that's why you want to be using layer masks instead of using the eraser tool. With the eraser tool, you're going to be losing everything. You can't go back and fix it. Right-click again and enable, and it's now working again. Let me just link that right there. Click inside between the two, and it's now linked. Also, if you want to get rid of a layer mask, if you've messed up or you're no longer using it, right-click and you can then delete that layer mask right here. It just removes it. I'll just do that delete. There we go. It removes it. I'll use the Control-Z, which is the undo keyboard shortcut. I'll bring that layer mask back in again. So far, all of these have been image layers, but there are other kinds of layers that you can use. One of them is a text layer. If I go over here, click on the text button, and the text tool up, make this size real large here, 72 point. That should be bigger. There we go. You can see the insertion point right here. I'm just going to type in text in all caps like that. If I come outside here, I can actually pull this layer around like any other layer and reposition things. Notice how I'm clicking outside here to do my repositioning. There, I'll just put it right there. So you can easily move things. Now notice over here on the right-hand side, this has a big T in there. There's no thumbnail icon for this. We know what it is because it says text. This is what is typed over here, not what you're seeing right there. So it's not saying text because it's a text layer. It's saying text because I typed in text right here. Let's just double click. It should bring back up the type tool. And I'll change this here to dog. Hit the green check mark. And notice what the layer says over here has now changed to saying dog. I can go over here, grab corners, rotate this around. Just like any old layer, I can grab the sides and change the size in here like that. Hit this cross stack to cancel that last motion. There we go, put it back where it was. So you have these options in here to work with your text layers just like you would with any other layer. Again, show and hide, all that kind of fun layer stuff. Now there's another kind of layer, and that is an adjustment layer, and that's very, very useful. Most people, when they're first starting out using Photoshop elements, and they want to change something, let's say I wanted to make this dog brighter, they go onto the dog layer over here, go up to Enhance, come down here to, let's say, Adjust Color or Adjust Lighting. I'll do Lighting and Levels. Make your adjustments in here, make the dog brighter, a more contrast on that. Bring the whites up a little bit. So you've made some adjustments, choose OK, and I've now changed the look of that dog. Now there's a problem with this in that I can't go back and fix that. That's a permanent fix. But I can change that by using an adjustment layer. I'm just going to undo my steps in here. Just use the Control-Z keyboard shortcut here to back up a little bit. And we'll go up here to Layer and come down to New Adjustment Layer. We have Fill Layers in here and we have Adjustment Layers. Fill layers are just what it sounds like. It gives you a new layer that's filled with something. You can fill with a solid color, a gradient, or a pattern. Adjustment layers allow you to make a layer that allows you to make adjustments on the layer underneath or layers underneath. This isn't for all of your adjustments, but it is for a few of them. Levels, brightness, contrast, they're kind of the same thing. I prefer using levels. Hue, saturation, gradient map, photo filter, invert, threshold, and posterize. So you have all of these different options. We'll use the level. Now at this point, you have a few choices. You can change your opacity. I prefer to change that after the fact, after I've been working with it, so I'll leave that one alone. If you want to, you can add a color in for your layer. That's right there. Same thing we talked about previously. You can change your blend modes in here. I recommend doing this as a later step. Don't do it now. And you can choose to use the previous layer to create a clipping mask. And what this really means is that it's going to be linking your adjustment to just that one layer. If you don't check this, then any adjustment you make will change everything underneath that adjustment layer. If you do check this, it's only going to be changing the one layer directly beneath. And that's what I want here. So I normally would be using this as a checked position. Choose OK. We now have our same adjustments in here, but in this case, it's coming in as a new layer, a new adjustment layer above our layer down below. Now I want to have this on the image layers. Let's just undo that. I'm going to right click. You can change your clipping mask in here by right clicking where it says levels, go way over here, and you can release your clipping mask. I'll pull this down one layer. So I'm repositioning this and applying it to this layer. I want it only on this one layer. So same thing, right click where the name is and create clipping mask is indented a little bit in here. So If it's indented, you know it's working on the layer right underneath. Now to bring back up our controls, and this is the part that I like, double click on the thumbnail, and here's the controls again. So I can make a change on this like that, make them really contrasty. There we go. Close that down. I've now made that change. If I don't like that, I can go back and do it again. And this is where the adjustment layers are really powerful. Same thing, double click on your thumbnail, brings back up your adjustments, and I can come in and then change that. This should be a 1 for the default. I think I'll make the lights lighter like this, and the darks just a little bit darker like that. There we go, midtones up just a little bit. Close it down, then we then have that adjustment on here. Now also, because this is its own layer, I can show or hide that adjustment right there. So I can double check and see how it works. So having it as a separate layer makes this much, much easier to use. You can apply these adjustment layers also onto text if you want to. If you have things happening, colorization on your text, that also works out just fine. Now something else that you can apply here onto layers, let me just hide this. Now come down here, I'm going to right click on the layer mask. I'm going to disable the layer mask. We're on our image side. I just want to show you some stuff that shows up very, very well on this kind of a box. And I'll hide that text also, get rid of that. Another thing you can do with layers is to add a style onto your layers. And that's over here where it says layer, and come down to layer style, and then style settings. This brings up a little dialog box right here, and you have 4 basic settings: drop shadows, glows, bevels, and strokes, and then a lighting angle to control things like where your shadow is showing. If you click on this, it's going to apply your shadow. You can see it over here, left-hand side. Now the arrow here, the line, points towards your light source. If I had a light up here, it points towards the light, which means the shadow is going to be down here. So it doesn't point to the shadow, it points to the light. You can see it right down there. There's our shadow. If I bring it down a bit, down here, you can see it's top left-hand side. If I bring it up a little bit, it's now going to be the left and bottom. We can see that more by changing the opacity. We have slider controls in here to adjust this. There's real opaque. The distance is how far away it is. You can see that. That's your distance. And the size is actually the feathering. The higher the size, the softer the edge is. So you can apply these kind of styles on this, and this shows up over here on your layer as that little FX right there, right-hand side. Let's say I want to have a glow in here. Let me add the glow in. I'll do an inner glow. Bring my opacity way up so you can see that, and I'll bring the size up, and there's a glow inside the picture. Or I can do a glow outside the picture. Same thing, opacity clear up. Notice also, this is kind of interesting, the glow is on top of the shadowing. So if you have a drop shadow, it's going to be hidden by the outer glow. You can combine both of those if you want to. Normally I will use one or the other for a project, not both at the same time. Just uncheck that one. Go back to our inner. You also can come in and change the color if you want to. Click on this little icon here, this little square, and choose a different color. Let's say I want to have kind of a green in here, maybe kind of a blue. I'll choose a blue coloration. And notice how the glow changes to that blue coloration. Then I'll put that back to white again, right there. Okay, let's hide the glow. You can add a bevel in here, choose bevel, and get this nice kind of a soft beveled edge. You can also do hard beveled edges. I'll show you that in just a moment. You can choose up or down. That's just the lighting on that lighting direction. I'll uncheck that. And then here's the stroke. And a stroke is basically an outline. It can go outside. See, there's an outside stroke. Or it can go inside. It's inside the frame of the picture. Or centered means that it's centered. So the edge of the picture is right here, right in the middle of that stroke. The one you choose depends upon your image. I normally use the outside. Notice also that the stroke is again hiding that drop shadow. And you can also change the coloration of your stroke. Just choose a new color just like that. And I'll put that back to black again. Now I said you can get hard edge bevels in here, which I think look better most of the time. And for that, I'm just going to cancel this. Notice how we no longer have that FX. We'll come back to that in a second. Come down to the bottom right-hand corner, you see a few things. So there's a button here for layers. You can show or hide your layers right there. Skip all this stuff, go over here to styles, and this brings in a whole bunch of different styles that you can apply to your layer, different layer styles kind of pre-designed for you. The important ones are up here where it says bevels. Click on these and it applies fancier effects here, fancier beveled edges. Let's try this one right down here. This is the standard hard edge right there. You can see right there, here's our hard edge. Now these are controlled by the same dialog box. Let's go back over here to our layers. Here's our FX again. If you double click on that, it brings back up the dialog box, kind of like double clicking on the thumbnail over here for the adjustment layers. Here's our angle, here's our size. I can change the size of my beveled edge right here. So you have that ability to come in and make adjustments on your bevels, on your styles, using the same style settings. Now there aren't a whole lot of adjustments in here, as you can see. I'll choose OK. A lot of your styles down here have multiple effects in them. For instance, if I came down here, let's come down to the Wow Plastic, kind of fun. I'll choose this yellow thing here. It changes the image over to this yellow look. I can change part of this with that pop-up, but I can't change everything. I'll use Control Z to undo that one change. And back to our layers again. So you have that kind of layer as well, kind of an option over here to work with these layers. Just a few things I want to cover here quickly. Up at the top up here, where it says normal, these are blend modes. This allows you to blend your layer into the layers underneath. If I darken it like that, notice that only the darker parts of this layer show up on that back layer. If I lighten, only the light parts show up on the back layer. Do things like screen, it's just going to kind of blend them together. Another one here is multiply, kind of multiplies the two together. So you can do some fancy effects in here using these different blend modes, and I cover this in a lot of my videos as well. You can change the opacity over here, a little slider control on the opacity, make it more or less transparent. If you want a little see-through effect, that's right here. This gives you a new layer. Click on that, you get a new layer. There we go. You can reposition the layer. This came in indented, so it's a clipping mask. I'll just right click over here on the name and release clipping mask. It's now its own layer. I can then put content on here if I wanted to. This allows you to group layers together. This layer, hold the shift key down, come down to here. These three layers, I want these in a group. I can do that. Click on this button here. They're now locked into a group. Click on that arrow here to show or hide the group. This is useful if you have a lot of stuff in here. You just want to clean things up. You can put some of that into groups, make it a bit easier to work with. There's more you can do with this. You can apply effects onto groups as well, but that's more advanced. We'll talk about that in other videos. Right here, you can add a new fill or adjustment layer. Click on that and choose what you want to have or add in. Same thing as going up here to the layer menu and choosing new fill or new adjustment layer. We've already seen the layer mask. This allows you to lock a layer, lock all the pixels so you can't make adjustments or changes on it. You also can lock transparent areas if you have any transparency on that layer. And this button allows you to delete a layer or delete a whole group if you have things into a group. So you have those options. You also can delete a group without deleting your layers if you want to. Kind of interesting. Click on this. You can do group and contents, that's everything, or just the group, and it takes things back out of that group. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot more you can do with layers, but this covers all of the basics. If you understand these basic things, you should have no problem then working with layers. And this is one of those things that you really need to learn. This is where the real power is inside of programs like Photoshop Elements, is the ability to work with and control your layers. Don't forget, the best way to learn how to use this program is with my complete training course where I cover everything. And I'll put a link for that right down there in the description. Also, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and you click that like button. That lets YouTube know that you enjoy this video, and they will then show it more often to more people so more people can find these videos and also learn from my training here on YouTube. And I'll see you next time.